The silent plea. The distress signal drifted through the cold void of space, a desperate cry for help. It carried across the vast galaxy, bouncing off relay stations, slipping past forgotten satellites, and piercing the silence of the stars. It was a message filled with fear, panic, and the unmistakable certainty of doom. This is Zephyr-9. We are under attack. We need immediate assistance. Please, if anyone can hear us, help us. The voice was shaky, filled with terror. It belonged to Chancellor Arvik, the leader of Zephyr-9. His insectoid fingers trembled as he sent the signal on every known frequency. His people were dying. His world was falling apart. Outside the great glass windows of the Zephyrian command tower, chaos ruled. The night sky was burning, filled with streaks of fire as alien ships crashed down. Screams and explosions echoed through the air. Buildings crumbled. The once thriving city was nothing more than a battlefield now. The enemy had come without warning. The Devourers. No one knew where they came from. No one understood what they wanted. They did not speak, did not negotiate. They simply consumed, living metal creatures that spread like a virus, tearing apart entire civilizations. And now, Zephyr-9 was next. Chancellor Arvik turned to his generals, his voice desperate. Did anyone respond? The communication officer, a young Zephyrian named Kiro, checked the transmission logs. His antennae twitched nervously. No, Chancellor, Kiro said. His voice was barely above a whisper. Not a single response. The Chancellor's shoulders sagged. They had been abandoned. Zephyr-9 was not a weak world. It was part of the Galactic Confederation, an alliance of powerful species that promised protection. But when the attack came, when Zephyr-9 called for aid, the Confederation did nothing. The Exaltor Dominion, the most advanced species in the galaxy, had refused to help. Too risky, they said. We cannot afford to lose our fleets. The Vorkath Empire, the warlike reptilian race known for their strength, had also ignored them. Zephyr-9 is not our concern. Even the Aelorian Union, the so-called peacekeepers of the galaxy, had turned away. We do not interfere in unwinnable battles. Cowards. Arvik's fists clenched as he stared at the flickering holographic display. The enemy was closing in. The capital city had only hours left before it was overrun. He turned back to Kiro. Send the signal again. To every corner of the galaxy. Someone must answer. Kiro nodded and resent the message. It was a futile attempt, but what else could they do? Minutes passed. Then an hour. Nothing. And then, a light blinked. Kiro's eyes widened. His voice cracked with disbelief. Chancellor, someone responded. Arvik rushed to the console. Who? Kiro hesitated. He checked the signature of the response, his antennae twitching with confusion. It's from the Sol system. The Chancellor frowned. Sol system. I don't recognize. Then it hit him. Sol. Earth. His heart sank. Of all the civilizations in the galaxy, the humans were the weakest. Their technology was outdated. Their ships were barely above trading vessels. They had no empire, no colonies, no influence. They were insignificant. And yet, they had answered the call. Arvik shook his head. It must be a mistake. No, Chancellor, Kiro whispered. It's real. A voice crackled through the speakers, rough and filled with quiet determination. This is Captain Ilias Voss of the United Terran Fleet. We received your distress signal. Arvik stared at the console. He had heard about humans, but he had never spoken to one. Their species was small, barely recognized in the grand scheme of the galaxy. You are responding. Alone? The Chancellor asked hesitantly. The human captain didn't hesitate. We don't abandon people in distress. But you are only one fleet. Our enemy is. We know, Voss interrupted. His voice was calm, steady, unshaken. We're coming anyway. Silence filled the command center. No one spoke. The Xipharians stared at the transmission in disbelief. The strongest species in the galaxy had turned their backs on Ziffer-9. The most powerful empires had refused to help. And yet, the weakest of them all, the forgotten race of Earth, was coming. Not because they had to, but because it was the right thing to do. Arvek swallowed the lump in his throat. His voice, for the first time in hours, carried hope. "Thank you, Captain." Captain Voss's voice was firm. "Hold the line. Humanity is on its way." The transmission ended. For the first time since the attack began, Chancellor Arvek allowed himself to believe. Maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. Because only humanity had answered the call. The lone fleet. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace, the dark void of space flickering as the ships materialized near Ziffer-9. There were only 10 vessels, a fraction of what any major galactic empire would consider a real war fleet. But they had come. Aboard the UTS Valor, Captain Elias Voss stood on the bridge, eyes locked on the holographic display of Ziffer-9. The planet was burning. Even from space, he could see the devastation. Massive plumes of smoke curled into the atmosphere, the surface dotted with explosions. Scanners picking up hostile activity, reported Lieutenant James Carter, his voice tight with urgency. The Devourers have breached 70% of the planet's cities. Voss's jaw tightened. They were running out of time. "Open comms to the Xipharian Command Center," he ordered. Within seconds, the flickering image of Chancellor Arvek appeared on the main screen. The Xipharian leader looked even more desperate than before. "You actually came," Arvek said, almost in disbelief. Voss nodded. "We don't make empty promises." Arvek exhaled sharply. "Captain, we have less than a day before my people are completely wiped out. The Devourer's main horde is closing in on our last stronghold. We sent coordinates." Voss glanced at his tactical officer, Commander Sarah Hayes, who gave him a grim nod. "Confirmed, sir. The enemy is massing near the underground bunkers in Sector Delta 5. Arvek's voice was urgent. "We don't have the firepower to hold them off. If we can't evacuate, we're dead." Voss didn't hesitate. "Then we'll get your people out." Arvek hesitated, his mandibles clicking together. "Captain, you must understand. The Galactic Confederation has much stronger fleets than yours. And yet, they refuse to help us." His tone turned skeptical. "Why would you fight a battle you cannot win?" Voss's expression remained calm, but his blue eyes burned with intensity. "Because someone has to." Silence. Arvek swallowed hard, then nodded. "Then may the stars guide you, Captain Voss." The transmission cut. Lieutenant Carter let out a breath. "Sir, you do realize we're outnumbered at least 100 to 1, right?" Voss smirked. "Then we better make every shot count." The doubt of the galaxy. Across the galaxy, powerful empires watched. The Exaltor Dominion, monitoring from their distant capital, shook their heads in amusement. "The humans have sent a handful of ships against an unstoppable enemy," a Exaltor general scoffed. "They're either brave or incredibly stupid." In the Vorkath Empire, the reptilian warlords growled in disapproval. "They fight with no hope of victory," a Vorkath commander said, crossing his clawed arms. "Honor in battle is one thing, but this is suicide." The Elorian Union, the self-proclaimed peacekeepers of the galaxy, simply watched in silence. One of their scholars sighed. "Perhaps humanity still has much to learn about survival." Across every major star system, the response was the same. Pity, disbelief, and certainty that Earth's fleet was marching toward its doom. But the humans didn't care, because unlike the others, they had come to fight. "The battle begins. Bring us into low orbit," Voss ordered. "Deploy ground teams. I want our Marines on the surface in 10 minutes." The UTS Valor and its fleet shifted position, descending rapidly toward Zephyr-9's burning atmosphere. Inside the ship's hangar, hundreds of human soldiers were already suiting up, checking their weapons, and preparing for the drop. They were outnumbered, but they were human, and humans never back down. Arrival to chaos. The UTS Valor plunged through Zifar 9's turbulent atmosphere, flames licking against its reinforced hull. Behind it, the rest of the human fleet followed, maneuvering through the storm of debris and wreckage that filled the sky. The planet was in ruins. On the surface, entire cities were nothing but skeletal remains of their former glory. The devourers had torn through them like locusts, leaving only smoldering husks behind. Explosions flickered across the landscape as Sci-Fi defenses struggled to hold back the relentless horde. Inside the ship's hangar, Captain Elias Voss stood in front of his troops. Hundreds of United Terran Marines, dressed in their black and gray battle armor, stood at attention. Their faces were hard, determined, fearless. Every single one of them knew the odds, and none of them cared. Voss's voice was steady as he addressed them. "This is it. We are the only thing standing between the Zypharians and complete annihilation." His sharp blue eyes scanned the room. No one else came. No one else even tried. But we did. Because we are human. Because we fight for more than just ourselves. The soldiers let out a collective battle cry. "We fight for those who cannot fight for themselves," Voss continued. "And today, we remind the galaxy what humanity truly stands for." Another thunderous cheer erupted. Then the signal came. "Captain," Commander Sarah Hayes called through the intercom. "Ground insertion in T-2 minutes." Voss turned back to his soldiers. "Lock and load. We drop in 60 seconds." The hangar filled with the clanking of weapons, the final checks of armor, and the deep, steadying breaths of warriors preparing for battle. The countdown began. 60 seconds. The ship trembled as it maneuvered through enemy fire. 45 seconds. Dropships lined up in formation, engines humming, waiting for the green light. 30 seconds. The roar of explosions outside grew louder. The battle was already raging. 15 seconds. The hangar doors slid open, revealing the burning world below. 5, 4, 3, 2. Drop. Into the fire. The first wave of human drop pods screamed through the sky, blazing trails of fire as they plummeted toward the battlefield. Hundreds of steel capsules punched through the thick smoke covering the ruined city of Delta 5, slamming into the ground like meteor strikes. The hatches burst open, and the Marines charged out, weapons ready. Chaos. The battlefield was a nightmare. Zypharian soldiers lay dead or dying, their weapons useless against the horrifying swarm that filled the streets. The devourers were everywhere, metallic, insectoid creatures with razor-sharp limbs and glowing, red eyes that dripped molten steel. They did not bleed. They did not feel pain. They only killed. The Marines opened fire. Explosive rounds tore into the creatures, blasting their mechanical limbs apart. The first few fell, but more swarmed in, climbing over the bodies of their fallen like an unstoppable tide. Sergeant Ryan Cole led his squad through the debris, firing shot after shot, each bullet tearing through the night like thunder. "They just keep coming," one of the Marines yelled. Cole ripped the pin off a grenade with his teeth and hurled it into a cluster of devourers. The explosion sent shrapnel flying, tearing through the monsters. "Then we keep shooting," Cole growled, his rifle blazing with relentless fire. From above, the UTS Valor rained down heavy artillery, blasting holes in the devourers' ranks. But for every enemy they killed, 2 more took its place. The Zypharians, once hopeless, stared in awe at the humans fighting beside them. One injured Zypharian soldier, his carapace cracked and bleeding, looked up as a Marine dragged him away from danger. "Why? Why do you fight?" The alien gasped. "You do not know us." The Marine didn't stop firing as he answered. "Because that's what we do." The war zone. The battle raged for hours. The Marines held the front lines, pushing forward, giving the Zypharians time to evacuate to the underground bunkers. But the Devourers were adapting. Captain Voss watched from his command post as enemy movements changed. "They're learning," Commander Hayes muttered. Voss's jaw tightened. The Devourers had never needed strategy before. They simply overwhelmed their enemies. But now, they were adjusting their attacks, reacting to human tactics. "They've never fought humans before," Voss said. "Now they're trying to figure us out." That meant they had little time before the enemy fully adapted. Voss turned to his officers. "We need to finish the evacuation and get the hell out of here before it's too late." Lieutenant Carter nodded. "I'll signal the final transports." But before he could, the monitors flickered with a new alert. Voss froze as he read the data. More Devourer ships had just entered orbit. A second wave was coming. And this time, they weren't just here to consume. They were here to wipe out everything. Voss took a deep breath, then activated the fleet-wide comms. "All units, this is Captain Voss." His voice was calm, steady. "We hold the line. The humans stand." The ground shook violently as another wave of Devourers slammed into the human defenses. Their razor-sharp limbs cut through metal and stone like paper, their glowing red eyes scanning for targets. They weren't just mindless machines anymore. They were learning. But the humans held their ground. Sergeant Ryan Cole and his squad had taken cover behind the remains of a Zephyrian transport, their rifles spitting fire at the enemy. Bullets slammed into the biomechanical creatures, some exploding into molten shards, but more kept coming. Cole ejected his spent magazine, slammed in a fresh one, and yelled over the comms, "Hold the line. Do not let them break through." The Zephyrian soldiers, once panicked and broken, now fought alongside the humans. They had never seen combat like this. Humans were not just strong, they were relentless. A Zephyrian lieutenant, Zarvik, crouched beside Cole, reloading his plasma rifle. "This is madness," Zarvik shouted over the roar of battle. "They will overwhelm us." Cole shot a Devourer straight through its glowing red core, watching as it collapsed in a heap of twisted metal. "Yeah," Cole muttered, cocking his rifle. "That's why we fight harder." A new enemy. From his command post, Captain Elias Voss watched the battle unfold on the holographic display. The enemy was shifting tactics, trying to flank human positions, probing for weaknesses. "They're evolving," Commander Sarah Hayes said, her voice tense. "They're starting to predict our movements." Voss narrowed his eyes. "Then let's give them something unexpected." He turned to Lieutenant Carter. "Tell the artillery crews to target those side streets. Cut off their reinforcements." "Aye, Captain." Carter relayed the orders. Moments later, heavy railgun artillery thundered from orbit, slamming into the flanking Devourers. The ground split apart, sending dozens of the creatures tumbling into the rubble. But then, the Devourers countered. In the distance, a massive metallic figure emerged from the burning cityscape. Unlike the others, this one was larger, towering over the battlefield, its armored plating twice as thick. Voss's blood ran cold. "What the hell is that?" Hayes whispered. The holographic scanner locked onto the new target. Designation: Devourer Behemoth. Unknown class. High-density armor. Weak points: unknown. The creature lifted one colossal arm, revealing a built-in energy cannon, and fired. The blast struck an entire squad of Marines, disintegrating them instantly. Voss clenched his fists. They couldn't afford to lose ground. He activated his comms. "All units, concentrate fire on the behemoth. Bring that thing down." The final push. Sergeant Cole's squad was the closest to the behemoth. "Shit," Cole muttered, eyes locked on the towering war machine. "All right, you ugly bastard, let's dance." His Marines fired everything they had, but their bullets bounced off the behemoth's armor. It was like trying to punch through a starship hull. Then, a new voice crackled over the comms. "This is Lieutenant Tessa Briggs, UTS Valor Air Support. We've got a present for you." From above, two Terran gunships roared in, their cannons unleashing a storm of missiles at the behemoth. Explosions engulfed the creature, but when the fire cleared, it was still standing. It turned toward the gunships, its massive energy cannon charging. "Evade!" Briggs shouted, but it was too late. A beam of raw destruction sliced through the sky, vaporizing one of the gunships in an instant. The second gunship spiraled out of control, crashing into a nearby building. Cole gritted his teeth. "Damn it, we need bigger guns." Then his comm buzzed again. "This is Captain Voss," came the calm but firm voice. "We're sending in the Titan-class railgun. Hold your position." The Titan strike. From orbit, the UTS Valor adjusted its position. Deep within the battleship, the Titan-class orbital railgun powered up. The weapon was designed to punch through starship armor. And now it was about to be used against a single target. Railgun primed. Carter confirmed. Target locked on the behemoth. Voss nodded once. Fire. A blinding white-hot streak tore through the sky, a bolt of kinetic energy traveling at near-light speed. The behemoth didn't have time to react. The impact ripped through its core, shattering its armor, sending a shockwave through the battlefield. For a moment, everything was silent. Then the massive war machine collapsed, crashing into the ruins of the city, crushed beyond repair. A cheer erupted from the human and Xipherian forces alike. "Now that's what I'm talking about." Cole grinned, slamming a fresh magazine into his rifle. But Voss wasn't celebrating yet. He turned to Hayes. "Status on the enemy forces." Hayes scanned the battlefield. "The behemoth is down, but the Devourers, they're still coming." Voss exhaled slowly. They had bought time, but they were still vastly outnumbered. He knew the final battle was coming. And this time, it wouldn't just be about survival. It would be about ending this war once and for all. The human stand continued. The battlefield was littered with fire, smoke, and bodies, but the humans refused to break. The Devourers were relentless, throwing wave after wave at the defenders. Even with the Titan-class railgun obliterating their behemoth, the metallic creatures continued to adapt. Sergeant Ryan Cole slammed a fresh magazine into his rifle. His squad was running low on ammo. "Cole, status," came Captain Voss's voice through the comm. Cole ducked behind cover as a Devourer lunged at him, its bladed limbs slicing through the air. With a quick roll, he raised his sidearm and emptied 3 rounds into its glowing core. The machine twitched and collapsed, its metallic frame smoldering. "We're still standing, sir," Cole replied, panting. "But we can't keep this up forever." Voss's voice was firm. "Hold the line. Reinforcements are inbound." Cole gritted his teeth and turned to his squad. "You heard the captain. We fight till we can't fight anymore." The last stand of Delta 5. Near the main evacuation point, Xipherian civilians were still being loaded onto transports. Human Marines guarded the perimeter, their weapons lighting up the night as they held back the incoming Devourer swarm. Commander Sarah Hayes was on the ground, directing the last of the evacuation. She wiped sweat from her forehead as she watched another wave of Devourers charge forward. "Damn it," she muttered. They wouldn't stop. A Xipherian soldier next to her, Lieutenant Zarvik, looked at her in disbelief. "How do you humans keep fighting? We have lost so much ground. My people would have fled by now." Hayes smirked, switching to her sidearm and unloading 3 precise shots into an approaching Devourer. "We don't have a word for retreat in our language." Zarvik blinked, but before he could respond, the ground shook violently. A new Devourer unit had arrived. It was twice the size of the normal ones, with a sleek black exoskeleton and 6 razor-sharp limbs. Its glowing red eyes locked onto the human defenses, and with a screeching roar, it charged. Hayes's blood ran cold. "We need heavy weapons on that thing now." Voss's final move. On the UTS Valor, Voss watched the battle unfold on the tactical display. His Marines were outnumbered. The Xipherians were barely holding together. The enemy wasn't stopping. It was time for a desperate move. "Lieutenant Carter," Voss said, his voice tight with resolve. "How long until we can activate the Moonbreaker protocol?" Carter hesitated. "Sir, that's a last resort. If we use it, we don't have a choice," Voss cut him off. "We need to end this. Now." Carter gave a slow nod and began punching in the command codes. The Moonbreaker protocol was one of Earth's most dangerous weapons, a controlled detonation of a celestial body, using precisely placed charges to create an electromagnetic shockwave capable of wiping out everything within a planetary radius. Voss's plan: blow up Ziffer 9's shattered moon and fry the Devourers in one single strike. But there was a catch. They would need to manually place the charges on the moon's surface, which meant someone had to go. The mission that could change everything. Voss opened his comms. "Sergeant Cole, I need your squad for a mission." Cole, still dodging Devourer attacks on the battlefield, wiped blood from his face. "Sir, with all due respect, I'm a little busy fighting off an apocalypse down here." Voss's tone was dead serious. "This is bigger than the ground battle. We're taking out the entire Devourer horde in one move." Cole paused. His instincts told him whatever came next was going to be insane. "I'm listening." Voss continued. "I need a team to plant fusion charges on Ziffer 9's moon. Once detonated, it'll release an EMP shockwave strong enough to disable every Devourer unit on the planet." Cole let out a sharp breath. "Let me guess, we're the ones planting the charges." Voss smirked. "You always wanted a front-row seat to history." Cole turned to his battered squad. They were exhausted, low on ammo, and barely standing, but every single one of them was still ready to fight. He took a deep breath. "All right, Captain. When do we leave?" Voss's answer was immediate. "Right now." The final gambit. The UTS Valor's hangar bay was alive with movement. Mechanics rushed to refit the strike team's transport, a heavily armored dropship built for high-risk missions. The crew knew this wasn't just another battle. This was humanity's last move in the war for Ziffer 9. Sergeant Ryan Cole and his squad stood near the loading ramp, checking their gear. "All right, listen up," Cole shouted. "We land on the moon, we plant the charges, and we get the hell out before it blows." His squad nodded, faces grim but ready. Lieutenant Tessa Briggs, their assigned pilot, leaned against the hull of the dropship. "I hope you boys like turbulence. That moon is a mess." Cole smirked. "Tessa, you could fly through a supernova, and I'd still take a nap." Briggs rolled her eyes and climbed into the cockpit. "Let's see if you're still cracking jokes when we're dodging plasma fire." A voice cut through the comms. "Captain Voss to strike team. You are clear for launch." Cole clenched his fist. This was it. The dropship's engines roared to life, lifting off the Valor's deck and shooting toward Ziffer 9's shattered moon. A graveyard in the sky. The moon was in ruins. Massive cracks split its surface, glowing with residual energy from the Devourer's mining operations. The enemy had been extracting raw materials, but their work had left the satellite unstable. One wrong move, and the whole thing could collapse. Briggs piloted the dropship through the debris field, dodging floating chunks of rock. "Cole, we've got Devourer sentries on the surface," she warned. Cole looked at the tactical map. The Devourers had stationed automated turrets and drone swarms to guard their mining facilities. They had no idea what the humans were about to do. Cole grinned. "Let's keep it that way." The dropship swooped in low, deploying the Marines. Cole and his squad hit the moon's surface hard, their boots kicking up dust in the low gravity. Above them, Ziffer 9 loomed like a dying ember, its burning cities barely visible from space. Cole activated his comm. "We move fast. Tessa, keep the engines hot. We're not staying long." Briggs chuckled. "Understood. Try not to die." The team rushed forward, making their way toward the primary mining station, the perfect spot to plant the fusion charges. The first few minutes were quiet, too quiet. Then, the ground trembled. A deep metallic shriek echoed across the crater. The Devourers had detected them. Race against time. From the shadows of the abandoned mining structures, Devourer drones emerged. Small, fast, and lethal, they swarmed toward the Marines, their bladed limbs flashing under the moonlight. Contact. A Marine shouted, opening fire. Bullets ripped through the drones, sending pieces of metal flying. But more kept coming. Cole grabbed a grenade, pulled the pin, and tossed it into the swarm. The explosion tore through the machines, buying them a few seconds. Move, 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 he yelled. The team reached the target site, a deep fissure in the moon's surface, where they began placing the fusion charges. Private Jenkins, the team's demo expert, worked fast. His hands were steady despite the chaos. 5 minutes until full charge deployment, he reported. Cole turned and fired at an approaching Devourer, putting a round straight into its core. Make it 3. The team fought tooth and nail, defending the site while Jenkins set the charges. Then, the ground shook violently. A Devourer warform burst from the crater below, a massive 4-legged monstrosity, its body covered in reinforced plating. Its glowing red eyes locked onto the humans. Cole's stomach dropped. We got a big one. The creature lunged, its razor limbs tearing through rock as it charged the Marines. They opened fire, but the bullets barely scratched its armor. Cole gritted his teeth. Briggs, we need an airstrike. Briggs's voice crackled over the comm. Stand by, hotshot. I'm coming in. Above them, the dropship roared over the battlefield, its side cannons unleashing a barrage of missiles at the warform. Explosions rippled across its armored shell, cracking the plating. Cole took his chance. He grabbed his last high-explosive charge, sprinted forward, and jumped onto the creature's back. His squad screamed at him. Cole, what the hell are you doing? Cole ignored them. He climbed up the thrashing Devourer, dodging its slicing limbs, until he reached its exposed core. This is for Earth, you ugly bastard. He slammed the charge into the core and jumped off, hitting the ground hard. Boom. The Devourer warform detonated, its entire frame collapsing into molten wreckage. Jenkins's voice came through the comm. Charges set. We're good to go. Cole groaned and pushed himself up. Then let's get the hell out of here. Escape and detonation. The Marines sprinted to the dropship, dodging the final wave of enemy fire as Briggs swooped in for extraction. Get in, she yelled. The ramp closed behind them as the dropship blasted off the surface, speeding away from the moon. Cole collapsed into his seat, breathing hard. They had done it. Captain Voss's voice came over the comm. Strike team, confirm status. Cole grinned. Charges are set. Let's light the fireworks. Voss didn't hesitate. Detonate. On the Valor's bridge, Lieutenant Carter pressed the final command. A deep, rumbling explosion erupted across the moon's surface. The shockwave built up in seconds, racing outward like a tsunami of energy. In Zifar-9's orbit, the Devourer fleet didn't even have time to react. The EMP surge slammed into their forces, frying every machine in an instant. The creatures froze, their red eyes flickering, then going dark. On the surface below, the remaining Devourers collapsed lifelessly, their once powerful bodies now nothing more than scrap metal. The battle was over. Victory for humanity. From their underground bunkers, the Zafarian people emerged cautiously. They expected destruction, but instead, they found silence. The war machines were dead. The humans had done the impossible. As the Terran fleet descended, Zafarian soldiers and civilians fell to their knees, looking up at their unlikely saviors. Chancellor Arvek stepped forward as Captain Voss and his Marines approached. The Zafarian leader bowed his head. We will never forget. When we needed help, only humanity answered the call. Voss nodded. That's what we do. The last stand. The battlefield lay silent. The Devourers were dead, their once relentless swarm reduced to lifeless metal husks scattered across Zifar-9's surface. The electromagnetic shockwave from the moon's destruction had fried their circuits, severing whatever unnatural intelligence had been controlling them. For the first time in days, Sci-Fi was free. Yet, even in victory, there was no celebration. The cost of survival was written across the ruins of the planet. Cities were reduced to rubble. Entire Zephyrian colonies were gone, wiped from existence. The once proud civilization had been brought to the brink of extinction. And among the wreckage, the Terran Marines stood, their rifles still in hand, their armor still stained with battle. Because even though the battle was over, the war was not. The hidden threat. Captain Elias Voss stood on the bridge of the USS Valor, watching the planet below. The Devourers were defeated, but something didn't feel right. Lieutenant James Carter approached, his face pale. "Sir," Carter said, his voice tight, "we're picking up something strange." Voss turned sharply, to find strange. Carter hesitated, then pulled up the sensor readings. The EMP disabled every Devourer unit on Zephyr-9, but he zoomed in on a cluster of inactive wreckage. "We're detecting movement." Voss's blood ran cold. "That's impossible," Commander Sarah Hayes muttered. "The EMP should have knocked them all out permanently." Carter swallowed. "Sir, it did, but something's activating them again." Voss clenched his fists. He turned to Hayes. "Deploy recon teams. I want eyes on that wreckage now." The Devourer's final trick. Sergeant Ryan Cole was back on the surface with his squad, sweeping through the destroyed battlefield. His boots crunched over metallic debris. The once lethal Devourers were nothing more than dead shells, their red eyes dark and lifeless. But something felt wrong. "Sir," Private Jenkins whispered, "I got movement." Cole turned. "Where?" Jenkins pointed to a pile of destroyed Devourers near the ruins of a Zephyrian bunker. Cole approached cautiously, his rifle raised. He nudged one of the lifeless bodies with his boot. Nothing. Then, a metallic click. Cole barely had time to react before the wreckage moved. A Devourer drone jerked upright, its eyes flickering back to life. Cole fired immediately, blasting its core before it could fully react. But then, another Devourer twitched. And another. And another. Jenkins cursed. "Sir, they're waking up." Cole's comm buzzed. "Cole, fall back now." It was Voss. "Something's overriding the EMP shutdown." Cole didn't argue. "Move back to the LZ." His team sprinted toward the extraction point, firing as more and more Devourers began reactivating. But these weren't like before. They weren't attacking immediately. They were waiting, watching. Cole's heart pounded. Something was controlling them. The true enemy reveals itself. Back on the Valor, Voss and his officers analyzed the sensor data. "These Devourers aren't just rebooting randomly," Hayes said. "Something is reactivating them, remotely." Voss stared at the readings. "But from where?" Carter's hands froze over the console. His face went pale. "Sir," he whispered, "the signal isn't coming from Zephyr-9." Voss's stomach dropped. Carter turned, eyes wide with horror. "It's coming from deep space." Hayes inhaled sharply. "You mean there's more of them out there?" Carter nodded grimly. "And they're watching us." A heavy silence fell over the bridge. Voss exhaled, his mind already racing. This wasn't over. The Devourers weren't just a mindless horde. There was something bigger behind them, something that had just seen humanity's strength firsthand. And now, it was watching, waiting, planning. Voss looked out at the darkness of space, his jaw tightening. "Send a warning to Earth," he ordered. Carter hesitated. "A warning, sir." Voss's voice was firm. "Tell them we're not just fighting a swarm. We're fighting something far worse. The galaxy watches." The Devourers were gone. For now. Zephyr-9 stood in silence, the battlefield still smoldering from the battle that had nearly wiped out its people. The last of the human dropships lifted off, carrying injured soldiers and Zephyrian refugees to the UTS Valor. But even in victory, Captain Elias Voss felt uneasy, because somewhere out there, the true enemy still watched. The aftermath. In the war room aboard the Valor, the surviving Zephyrian leadership stood alongside Voss and his officers, watching a holographic projection of the battlefield below. Chancellor Arvek stepped forward. His antennae twitched, his mandibles clicking with hesitation. "My people, owe you our lives," Arvik said, his voice thick with emotion. "Had you not come, Zephyr-9 would have been erased." Voss nodded. "We don't fight for thanks, Chancellor. We fight because it's the right thing to do." Arvik lowered his head in respect. "Regardless, our people will never forget what humanity has done." Commander Sarah Hayes leaned forward, arms crossed. "The question is, what now?" Silence filled the room. The Devourers were not dead. The fleet had only fought a fraction of them. And now, somewhere in deep space, their masters knew about humanity. "We need to be ready," Voss finally said. This was just a test. The message to Earth. In the communications chamber, Lieutenant Carter prepared the transmission to Earth's High Command. The message was clear. Zephyr-9 has been saved. The Devourers have been defeated, but we were wrong about them. They are not mindless. They are not just a swarm. Something bigger is behind them, watching, learning. And now, they know about us. We must prepare, because this war is far from over. Carter pressed end. The message raced across the stars toward Earth. Humanity had won this battle. But the real war had just begun. The galaxy reacts. The Exaltor Dominion, the most advanced species in the galaxy, watched the battle's recordings. Their High Council stood in stunned silence. "They actually won," one of them whispered in disbelief. The Vorkath Empire, the war-hardened reptilian warriors, reviewed human combat footage. Their warlord grunted in approval. "These humans, they are stronger than we thought." Even the Aelorian Union, the so-called peacekeepers who refused to intervene, now whispered among themselves. "What have we unleashed?" Across the stars, the legend of humanity began to spread. A species that stood alone, and still won. A species that fought for others, even when no one fought for them. The galaxy had ignored Earth before. Now, they would never ignore them again. Final scene. A shadow in the dark. Light years away, in the depths of an uncharted void, a single Devourer ship floated in the abyss. Inside, a hollow, inhuman voice echoed through the dark corridors. "They are different." A second voice, cold and calculating, replied, "Yes, they adapt. They resist." A flickering red light pulsed in the shadows. "They are dangerous," the first voice whispered. The red light grew stronger, illuminating the metallic walls. "Then we will erase them." The signal cut to black. The galaxy watches continued. The battle for Zephyr-9 had ended, but its echoes rippled across the galaxy. The humans had won, despite impossible odds. They had fought not for wealth, not for power, but because no one else would. And now, the entire galaxy was watching. The shockwave of a victory. On the Exaltor Dominion's homeworld, a council of high-ranking officials analyzed the battle footage. The holograms displayed human drop troops landing under fire, Marines standing their ground, orbital strikes carving through Devourers like a blade through flesh. The Exaltor had not expected this. They fought against an enemy that should have overwhelmed them, one counselor muttered. They should have lost. And yet, they did not. The supreme strategist of the Exaltor leaned forward, studying the footage of Captain Elias Voss, barking orders with calm efficiency. "These humans," the strategist said slowly, "are more dangerous than we ever imagined. Then perhaps we should wipe them out now before they become a greater threat," another official suggested. The strategist shook his head. "No," he said. "We will watch. We will wait. Humanity has just revealed its strength. Now we must understand its weaknesses. For the first time in history, the Xaltor saw Earth as a potential threat. The warriors of Vorkath. In the fiery halls of the Vorkath Empire, the warlords gathered to review the battle recordings. The reptilian warriors, known for their brutal strength, had once dismissed humans as weak. Now, they were reconsidering. The Vorkath war chief, a massive, scared beast, let out a deep rumble of approval as he watched human marines fighting in close combat, refusing to fall. These humans, the war chief growled, they fight like cornered beasts. They do not surrender. One of his generals sneered, so do many creatures. That does not make them strong. The war chief narrowed his yellow eyes. No, he said, but they fight for more than survival. He turned to his commanders. Prepare an envoy. I wish to speak with this Captain Elias Voss. The room fell silent. The Vorkath had never offered diplomacy to an outsider before, but humanity was different. They were not just warriors. They were something more. The Elorian Union's fear. In the grand spires of the Elorian Union, the so-called peacekeepers of the galaxy, their leaders debated. The humans interfered in a conflict that was not their own, one official said, adjusting his shimmering robes. They violated Confederation law, another agreed. But they won, came a quieter voice, and they did what none of us dared to do. A hush fell over the chamber. The Elorians believed in balance, in neutrality. They had chosen not to intervene in Zifar-9's destruction. They had calculated that the Devourers were unstoppable, and yet the humans had stopped them. One of the elder counselors sighed. This is a problem. How so? Another asked. The elder turned to face the others. Because humanity has shown that power does not lie with those who hold the largest fleets, but with those willing to fight, no matter the cost. Back on the Valor. Captain Elias Voss stood in the command center of the UTS Valor, staring at the deep space transmission logs. The enemy had not been defeated. They were still out there, watching. Voss clenched his jaw. We're just getting started, he muttered. Commander Sarah Hayes stood beside him, arms crossed. Earth Command has acknowledged the situation, she said. They're mobilizing the fleets. The Terran Defense Force is preparing for whatever comes next. Voss exhaled. Good. But deep down, he knew no fleet would ever be enough. The Devourers had been only the first wave. And somewhere, out in the dark, their masters were preparing for war. Final scene. The true enemy awakens. Light years away, beyond the edge of known space, a lone Devourer vessel drifted through the abyss. Inside, cold metal walls pulsed with eerie red light. Something ancient stirred. A voice, neither organic nor machine, whispered into the void. They resist. Another voice, deeper, colder. Yes, they fight unlike the others. A pause. Then, we underestimated them. A distant hum filled the chamber as thousands of Devourer units activated at once, their red eyes blazing to life. A final command echoed through the darkness. Prepare the second wave. This time, we will not fail. The void shivered, and then, silence.